Hello everyone, this is Ether Dragon, and welcome back to another episode of Fire Emblem Heroes. Here we are this week. As you can see, not too great, but replays might be another story. So this week, of course, we're just goofballing with Legendary Julia, running a turn 1 AoE special. Usually it doesn't fare too well. I just figured we would try it again for the memes. But one small inaccuracy here for this first replay. So originally, we were running the Quick Impulse Ignis set on Seliph. So then I forgot that giving Legendary Julia the Quick Impulse seal means Seliph kind of loses his seal. So, he just casually doesn't have a seal for this match. But offense, as expected, was Garbo. It was more Garbo, more so caused by errors from my play rather than the teams being too strong for our usual offense team. It basically came down a lot of times to either mistapping or just miscalculating something. As we saw in one of the replays, or one of the offense videos, that was just a complete goof, missing that, not taking into account that the res tactic buff prevents Legendary Micaiah from getting debuffed by sabotage attacks. So because I knew she was quadding, like I computed the quad, she got an extra 28 damage, which is kind of a small problem. Because that's definitely a lot of damage. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's what's happened has happened, and spoiler alert, it probably wouldn't have mattered if I did have a great offense this week, because of course this defense layout is kind of meme. Legendary Julia's AoE special doesn't ever do enough damage. Like 70 up to 82 visible attack is not great when you're trying to take out units, especially with damage reduction. But I noticed the first replay that Seliph didn't have a seal, so I've decided we're gonna just try from here on out trying out Steady Breath seal. So the gimmick behind that is if someone wants to pull someone in a previous week used Dual Lin turn 1 to attack Seliph. So if they're not running guard, he can accelerate Ignis in one round and counter with that. But of course, if it's like Yuri, then it's not going to make any difference. But the other thing with Steady Breath is if someone has guard and if someone has guard, or even if they just initiate into him, it's low enough cooldown to where he can counter with Ignis, which honestly doesn't matter this week. The big problem for this week is that there's a particular AR offense unit that's bonus this week. Kind of just wrecks Seliph out the window. So yeah, there's not much we can do about that. One unfortunate consequence of that, but yeah, if you haven't figured it out already, it's because Uller is bonus. So people can just bring Uller and just one run KO Seliph consistently. Nothing too surprising there. But what's surprising is the fact that they didn't move their Milla, so we're actually just gonna get the double dance on Bramamon to pick up a kill. Which definitely shouldn't have happened. They could have prevented it for sure, but ripperonis. And with that, he decides to just surrender because yeah, that's just a unforced error. We go with this team. Loaded up on structures. Level 9 Flyer School. Not sure when that ever would be useful. I guess there's like Harmonized Katria. Who else? What other flyers show up a lot in defense that would be spoopy? I guess any like flyer that's in a harmonized Catria defense, a decent one that is. Not sure what their plan is here. I would imagine they're probably just gonna go for a hit and run. A lot of people like to hit and run against this defense, even though it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. You can definitely hit and run against this defense, but the run part is the hardest part for people to figure out, apparently. Because they definitely don't run here. Just because the breakable wall is there doesn't mean it's not going to be broken, so... Here the AoE special gets to do something. I mean, Legendary Julio would have already done perfectly fine against Grima regardless. The main purpose of the AoE special is kind of like a steamroll train, where a lot of people like to put their units close to each other, so Blazing Wind can chip down more than just one unit. Because otherwise, Blaze Seize is probably just better. Easy one-shot on Grima by a long shot. But as usual, not doing much other than Pathfinder. But yeah, dagger in range of Seliph is just not a great idea. And even Winterl Tina, they don't have their harmonized skill up, so that's just a kill without any counters required. And Guinevere just gets obliterated by Ignis here. And I mean, there's not much left for them to do here. Seliph is just too big of a threat. And then there's Bramon chilling in the back with Luna. So Dagger actually unable to one-shot Nils, Pog. Do a whopping 1 damage. Totally matters, Capo. But yeah, Seliph is just too much attack for Milla here. That's a big problem for Milla. Like, even if she doesn't get debuffed by like Bright Shrine or something, there's this problem where she just doesn't have enough HP, so if she gets doubled, she typically gets one run KO'd. Except for those niche exceptions like we've had in some previous matches on offense. Like that one Galaxy Braid match against the legendary Sigurd, Maribel, Selena thingamajig. That was ridiculous. Yeah, this defense is not great because, well, number one, you can just face tank it. You do have to be a bit more careful about where you just hit end turn. You can't just hit end turn anywhere and expect to live. It is possible to do that as well, but definitely requires a lot more than most people have available. But yeah, mostly hit and run works pretty well if you know how to run. That's the problem. A lot of people just don't run far enough. They kind of just leave their units around like this, and that certainly does not help. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I'm not sure what they were expecting, but now all of their units are at 1 HP, so that's just not gonna bode well. It's taking 0 damage from some of these units is non-trivial, to say the least. But here we go again with the usual meme shenanigans. Uller is just going to just do Uller things. Having that permanent desperation is super nice. Unfortunately, she doesn't get any built-in special acceleration. That would be nice, but who knows? Maybe she might get that in a refine. Of course, the next logical follow-up is for Bramon to pick up a kill and then get murdered afterwards. But you know, we definitely need to do 61 times 2 to this 1 HP Dancer Eldigan. At least we do a nice amount of damage, but Yeah, it's just Uller things. Not really much we can do about that. This team is more designed to attack into enemies, not get attacked by enemies. So generally speaking, you can just roll the defense by just player phasing into it. Speaking of player phase, yeah, I kind of don't know how people don't have more player phase option teams to employ against a defense like mine, because you bring those kind of teams not for defenses like mine, but for more just like general formation teams. It just so happens that a consequence of my defense being laid out like this is that you just casually get obliterated by player phase shenanigans. But I mean, of course, Nils is never going to survive dual Lin. That would be very strange. But of course, we don't have duo's hindrance, so they can just keep attacking and getting more actions, which is of course all part of the plan. They use their harmonized skill here, and they decide to just leave because they've isolated Sylvia, so there's no threats here. Because Seliph doesn't move before Legendary Julia. If he did, then they would have to consider, you know, the chance that they have to make sure that Seliph doesn't break the breakable wall to let Legendary Julia just obliterate Tiki. But that's not a problem for them. So here, of course, we're going to proc Ignis into the 80% damage reduction. We do 15 damage, which, you know, is pretty decent. Given the 80% damage reduction, I'd say that's not too shabby. But yeah, the damage reduction is just super nice. And he comes out the gate pretty fast. And of course has null follow-up, which is really huge for ranged units. So that allows him to just ignore the impact. Not that it matters there, but able to get more damage reduction prepped up, and all that's left is the ether structure. So there we go. You know, if we had Glacies here, we would actually do not too bad damage. Oh, of course we won't one-shot him, that would be ridiculous, but you know, to beat damage reduction you just have to do more damage for it. The more practical way of dealing with damage reduction is, of course, just negating the damage reduction. Speaking of which, there's the new Heroes banner trailer that came out with Ascended Legarn and some units that honestly felt kind of long overdue given their popularity from what I've heard in the Fire Emblem franchise, but yeah, the main things out of there, Ascended Legarn is basically a giant stat stick with -1 special accelerator, or that has, I don't know what people call it now, slaying. Of course here we get the AoE special. Here the AoE special versus Glacies. Glacies again is probably better, but it doesn't matter here. Legendary Julia just does too much damage to Henriette, and Henriette cannot do a lot of damage back, so that's just a recipe for dropping your fire save units, but they get bolt tower damage. So yeah, anyways, back to Ascended Legarn. It's a Bocav, colorless Bocav I should say. She's just going to be able to hit like a truck, especially if her weapon's maxed out. Being able to get +12 to all stats, if you're buffed for, I guess, +6 to all stats and field buffs. Or if also, you know, she yoinks. She also counts, whatchamacallit. She counts field buffs on the enemy unit as well, so getting to 24 for the max +12 to all stats is pretty solid, but Yeah, I would not be surprised if I were to see her in Ether Raid's defense with over 100 attack. Like, of course, that's the most ideal scenario, but even if she has absolutely nothing procs off of her weapon in terms of the stat exchange, you know, she can still get around 9. She can probably get around 90 attack or something, which is definitely pretty devastating for general matchups. Because of course even units like Dual Lift, granted Dual Lift attacks res, but a lot of Dual Lifts tend to only float around 80-90 attack in the first place, so I don't know. There's definitely a lot of things that Ascended Legarden's missing, but overall, I think she's just a decent unit. I don't think she'll age too well, but at the end of the day, they can kind of do whatever they want on Ascended units because people are going crazy for the Ascended florets. So, you know, you can kind of do whatever. But looks like they're gonna go in here, which is interesting. Not sure what their plan is here because, okay, they're just planning to hit and run. Very interesting way to run, given that Bride Fjorm did absolutely nothing to isolate either of our dancers. But yeah, on Ascended Legarden's crit, Rouse's attack speed 4, giving the null panic effect on top of the +6 attack speed. It's a good upgrade. I just don't feel like I don't know. It makes Rouse's a good amount more usable. It's just I don't know. Would have liked to see more. It's good for what it is though. Like if I had Rouse attack speed on Nino or 4 on Nino or something, that would definitely be a consideration. Is what? I guess it wouldn't help Nino too much though because actually would it? I actually don't know off the top of my head right now what the interaction is between Null Panic, Panic, and Blade Tome. Should probably verify that the interaction is what I think it is. But yeah, end of the day, I think she's just gonna be fine. Vocab with stats seems good enough for now. That's the problem for now. Speaking of for now, Cap. Who else is on the banner? There's, why am I forgetting his name? Volk? I believe it's Volk. With lethality, new special. Pretty likely, it's almost certain that it's going to be daggers only. Just, that's the only restriction, daggers only. Because that thematically is what lethality is. In terms of its effects, being a 4 cooldown special I feel like is just too high. Of course the purpose of it being that high is to make it harder to infinite chain, because if it was 3 cooldown, then units with -1 special cooldown acceleration and like special spiral or something can just, once it gets going, they just proc it over and over and over and over, and that would be pretty strong. The only other problem with lethality, it does ignore damage reduction, but the problem is its main effect is that it reduces the enemy's defense and res by 75% during combat. So basically it's a stronger Luna in some sense. Also, they just don't have Unity active on their Wintrell Tina, so she just does not have much stats. It's not gonna end well. I mean, even with Unity active, I don't think she was two-shotting Seliph, especially without Twin Blades. Yeah, the problem with that kind of effect on lethality is then you're completely dependent on your attack stat. Because let's just say lethality was actually reduces the foe's defense and res by 100%. So literally, you do as much damage as your attack stat. Which, theoretically it sounds great. But then you have to realize that was a theoretical, hypothetical 100% damage reduction. If you're reducing by like 75%, let's say, the average Joe unit has, I don't know, we'll just go highball it and say 40 defense or res. Then it becomes 10. So if you have like 70 attack or something, you can do 60 damage. Like, conceptually, you can pull off one-shots with lethality. It's just that the scaling is, again, based off your attack. So if you're fighting an actual tank that has, I don't know, 80 defense or res, that drops down to 20, like that's a big deal. But if that enemy unit has 70 HP in a mode like Ether Raids, that means you need 90 something attack to one shot. And of course, if it's like Ascended Fjorm, that's a whole other problem. I mean, even not including Ascended Fjorm, just any unit that uses a damage reduction range special against ranged units, you just cannot one-shot with lethality that way. Against generic stuff, just generic stat lines and whatnot, lethality is more than enough to pick up one-shots if you stack attack, but that's the main problem. Other than accelerating it, there are definitely ways to get it up turn 1. One of the more budget options would be running Ouch Pouch with Quicken Pulse, and then your choice of like times pulse for infantry units / infantry pulse or something like that. There are some. You could also, of course, use a unit with slaying, pair them with like, I don't know why you would pair them with Valuria, but there are ways to get it up turn 1. Of course, infantry pulse is the most straightforward way to get it up turn 1, but again, you need to have a massive attack stat to take advantage of lethality. Because if you don't one-shot with lethality, you're already kind of in a bad spot. Because the main premise of having such a high cooldown special is that you need to get... If you're going to charge up a special of that high of a cooldown, it better pay off. So that's why, like, in our meme defense layout here, Glacies Legendary Julia is pretty useful because that Glacies does a lot of damage. Of course, like lethality, damage reduction in the form of like any sort of damage reduction involving a special, but in the case of Glacies here, literally any form of damage reduction is so detrimental, especially in Ether Raids with the HP inflation. So I don't know. I do expect lethality to be solid. It's just not overpowered. That's essentially what it is, which is fine. Since the current tank, the main problem is the current ultra top end Ether Raids offense tank meta is incredibly strong. Bar near save. Near save is where things can crumble currently by a decent amount. Although Flame definitely helps them out. I don't know. Yeah, honestly, the best near save gimmicks probably involve like the Pirate Surtur, Valentine Gustav archetype, where you just get that massive damage reduction on the first attack. You don't get any damage reduction in any further attacks, which is why your goal is to just one-shot the enemy before they get to attack again, but I don't know. Lethality, again, you'll see it around, but again, even for general use, like if you wanted to use lethality for arena, how the heck are you gonna charge it if you're not using a unit like Volk? Because another problem, of course, nowadays is the presence of guard spam. A lot of units nowadays have some form of guard, especially the tankier units, because that's a necessity. But I think we're going into our last replay here. Last replay of the week here. Looks like we have Ascended Fjorm. Speaking of who, this team should not be able to beat her, especially with a near save combo. Like, the best try would be Seliph against Ascended Fjorm because she would not do very much damage to Seliph. Zia comes out the gate with 52 defense. But of course they have a near save Hilda, and of course they have Flame for damage reduction. This team is not intentionally engineered to not be able to deal with Ascended Fjorm, just to see how people would use her, but we did not see her that much this week, even though she's bonus. Kind of surprised at that as well. Also, even pulse time memes. But yeah, we're not going to do very well here. Luna is basically all our damage output, so that's just a rip. And of course, Naught's below 25% HP now, so she's basically useless. And of course, Seliph against Hilda is never going to be a good matchup. But they do get the exact one-round KO for rigged reasons. Totally not rigged. But yeah, here Fjorm doesn't get to proc her special because we uncharged it with whatchamacallit. We uncharged it with even pulse tie. But unfortunately that's about as good as it's going to get because of course Hardy Fighter means Brahmon's guaranteed follow-up attack, which is very important in this particular matchup. And we don't have Julia's AoE special coming in, so they can just heal back up and hit end turn again. And they're pretty much fine at this point. Legendary Julia is not going to do too well, because it all targets on not Ascended Fjorm, which is a kind of a problem. If we could somehow chip her down to a super low HP, you could see there we were still doing non-zero damage, even though we're blue. And there was Flame as well, so Nils, of course, not going to do well. Sylvia's not going to do well. But yeah, there's a lot for us to work on. Going down the line, especially on our anima defense. That's the meme defense right now. This defense is remotely usable when we're using a decent set of units, but yeah. Kind of scatterbrained this episode. Also kind of forgot to mention that at the beginning of the episode that I'll be out of town or something along those lines for a week or two. So there's definitely not going to be a lot of videos rolling out. Replay video is probably just going to be silent, maybe not even have animations. So I don't know if I'm going to have that much time to record replays, but we're definitely going to at the very least record replays. I don't even know if we're going to do resonant battles. Maybe I can blitz that out well, I can technically blitz that out anytime, but maybe no commentary. Arena Assault this week, speaking of which, kind of wish I kind of want to restart the series, Arena Assault series, but not really. Nowadays, it's just like, do you have the tools to beat specific units? And this week's problem, of course, is Legendary Fae, because Life Unending is quite annoying. And then there's some sets that run like Steady Breath and Seal. So the point being, if you can't take her out, so first you have to proc Life Unending the first time. If you can't one round KO her straight up, then she gets full healed back. She gets healed back to full, goodness. And then with the Steady Breath Seal, if you can't one-shot her then she can recharge up her Life Unending with Steady Breath if you don't have like guard or some way of resetting the special cooldown. So then you have to deal with the miracle again. player phasing her to take her out is much more complicated than just hitting end turn. So, yeah. I tried goofballing this week and taking her out by player phasing, and definitely a pain against this steady breath set. But anyways, we'll be back when the results drop in. And time for some totally great rankings. Outside of top 6k, so was that top 10k? Yeah. Minus 102 on defense expected. This week at least we have a sheriff for offense, so we might have a chance to get back in. It is water season, so probably going to use Chrome, although Ascended Fjorm bonus will make it tricky. As for defense, I mean, I don't know. Probably stick with this. Maybe we kick out Mirrorless for Legendary Crom or something, but honestly, not going to be too big of a difference. So it's kind of a why bother kind of deal. Back to interval 20 we go, and we should have stayed here in arena. Went to absolute overkill. I was just going for 3 762s, but apparently the game was like, hello, do you want 764s and 766s instead? So we ended up getting more than I was expecting to get. I was trying to scout out score, but that clearly didn't happen, and yeah, we already collected Allegiance battles. Mjolnir Strike, it's Astra Major, so we're still staying in tier 21. Next season is going to be the real test. Might kill our streak, but I mean, it's not the end of the world. But until then, thanks for watching. As always, this is Ether Dragon, and hope to see you all next time. Bye!